We are thrilled to welcome President and CEO of TechNation, Angela Mondu, and she is joined by Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Services Branch at Shared Services Canada, Stéphane Cousineau. And they're going to be talking about the changing face of government procurement in Canada. So welcome to you both.
Hey, how are you doing? Stéphane, good to see you. Good to see everybody here today for the kickoff to Forward 50 2021. We're happy to be here. I'm super excited to be moderating this event with my great friend, Stéphane. It's good to see you here, Stéphane.
Hello, Angela.
But even more fun than sitting here with Stéphane is the topic, the ongoing hot topic that we're going to be talking about, which is procurement, not just procurement, but agile procurement, and why it's so important when we're talking about technology. We're also going to be talking about how we, the tech sector and our government, Shared Services Canada in particular today, have been really able to drive collaboration. And you heard Catherine talking about that earlier. I'm a firm believer that to move anywhere post-pandemic, we really have to have industry, government, academia collaboration, no question. So today's a good news story. It's only going to get better. Let's get to it. Agile procurement. Why is it important for Canada? I want to throw out 3 reasons before I hand off to you, Stéphane. First of all, Canada's government, hate to say it, hasn't been known for being easy to do business with. Procurement's been non-inclusive. It's resulted in our leading edge scale-ups having to do business in other nations before they can do business in Canada. So that's been one challenge. Another challenge is the word obsolete. Agile procurement, tech challenges are effective, they're efficient. RFPs are really obsolete when it comes to talking technology. Our corps and multinationals at TechNation describe government procurement processes as not always being in sync when you're procuring tech that's available in the market today. And last but not least, pandemic has really brought to light government orthodoxies and allowed us to kind of shift and change those orthodoxies. And changing those can drive to greater innovation. For instance, procurement shifting from rigid and time-consuming to flexible and efficient. So Stéphane, let's talk about this much needed change and the work that you've been doing and collaborating with over the last couple of years. Your team in Shared Services Canada, we've been describing as trailblazers in agile procurement. And I'd love to have you talk about some of that work that you've been doing in agile procurement.
Thank you, Angela. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you, Angela, and to speak about something that in my mind will be very transformative and very productive for what we do in procurement, but also for the government of Canada and Canadian citizens. It's nice to be thought as trailblazer, but let me start to say when it comes to bringing it to life is we did it, right? Like our team in collaboration with the industry. At SSC, we recognize the need and opportunity to rethink the government procurement process, like finding ways to make them more effective, more flexible. It's really important in my mind to reduce the barriers to entry and to make it as easy as possible for companies to bid on our contracts. So in terms of how we've done it, to answer your question, Angela, first, I have to say, we've decided together that we needed to actually have a center of expertise in agile and innovative procurement. So we've put together the center of expertise, and the next step was to actually engage with the industry, such as TechNation, right? So vendors who we already working with and other new vendors, we were reaching out to them. And the first question came to mind is, okay, we want to listen to what are your pain points, right? Truly understand what are the challenge with the procurement processes. So it became very quickly evident that there was a lot of challenge, like very, as you said, Angela, labor intensive process that requires a lot of written material, making the process very demanding for vendors. Sometimes you have like the statement of requirements. There are like hundreds and hundreds of pages. So in short, lengthy, prescriptive, rigid, and sometimes complicated, as you know. So what we've done is we started to design a procurement process that would be more collaborative and less complicated. And I have to say, sometimes faster. I don't want to say all the time, but certainly sometimes faster. So I'm really pleased, Angela, because so far at Shared Services Canada, we run roughly 9 pilots where we have applied these techniques, right? And we're putting the final touches also to a roadmap that we call the Agile Procurement Process 3.0, because it's a good thing to do pilots, but we really want to actually scale this experience that we're doing with the industry and technician. We've learned a lot. One, it's critical, to your point, to be very collaborative with all the stakeholders right from the beginning. Bringing the technical authorities, the procurement officers, the vendors together will pay off big time by reducing the amount of time required for the design phase that's happening at the beginning. The other thing we're trying to do is not to be too sequential. Try to do as much as we can in parallel. And the pilots that we're talking about, that's what we actually have done. I have to say, there's no doubt we do have a lot of bureaucratic rules, as we call them. And there are reasons for that related to risk and ensuring accountabilities. But I think at SSC, working with the industry and technician, we found ways to balance sound management and risk reduction, right? So, so we're looking at that. I think what we also learned is that agile approaches can be more inclusive, and you made allusion to that. So we can build in more steps to include small and medium-sized businesses without adding a lot of time and complexity to our process. So the experience, as you know, Angela, has been so far so good, really positive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you've talked about a couple of things that I think are really important. One is removing the barriers to entry, the center of expertise, which is something that's really been the foundation of driving some process and collaboration behind everything. All great points. So what I'd like to have you share with us now, Stefan, is working through all of that and creating that change and the center of expertise to support that. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that you might be able to help others apply as they look at agile procurement as a possibility?
So one of the things that we keep repeating and something that we've been experiencing is this thing that we call a true collaboration process with a lot of consultation and engagement from associations such as Technician, the vendor community. And as I said, it's now all fully integrated into our roadmap moving forward. What we're doing and what I would share also is this process allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of the vendors, and we're open to receive the feedback, right? Whether it's positive or negative, it's for in a view to actually improve the process. So being open, engaged, listening. We under this true collaboration process, what we do is Shared Services Canada essentially, and any partners that would want to join in, engage with vendors more fluidly. We have open channel of communication while we're ensuring openness, fairness, and transparency, which is really critical in the procurement we do in the government. We do this, like, for example, through running invitation to the vendors to refine the process. We engage the vendor through one-on-one presentations, surveys, collaborative brainstorming. So less writing, more collaboration, communication in those elements. So the result, Angela, is together we're able to define some elements of the solicitation towards a better outcome for the government of Canada and the Canadian citizen. It gives the industry an opportunity to influence also SSC in the design of our technology to be procured. It also gives, because of the process that we have adopted, a chance to the small and medium enterprise to play in the sandbox with the big businesses. So I would hand my answer by saying I'm a strong believer in the true collaboration process, which is a success factor of agile procurement process. And it also gives, as I said, the SSC reassurance that we're buying the right technology to meet the government's needs.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I completely agree. I think only good things can come when government and tech work together. We've been engaging, prototyping instead of documenting, and really ultimately getting tax experts to help design the solution, right, that government needs. So really positive direction forward through that whole collaboration. I want to shift now to one of my favorite topics, supply chains. I'm an ex-logistics officer in the military, and I now call supply chain in Canada a superpower. It really is. And diversifying the federal supply chain has obviously been very, very critical. We saw that with the good job that Canada did in terms of diversifying the procurement of vaccines, and we had more partners around the world than other nations, and it really served us well. But when we're talking about social procurement in government, there have been some challenges to that. Shared Services has now developed a new pilot, or actually it's going to be a formal program underway called Scale Up. TechNation is really proud to be supporting, again, working with Shared Services Canada to be supporting this through a digital marketplace. And the goal of Scale Up, and I think this is phenomenal, is really to increase the diversity of bidders. We know, and I mentioned earlier, very difficult for inclusivity or inclusion of small, medium enterprises. That includes diversity for government contracts. So what do we really need to do to shift Scale Up from being a program that needs to be adopted to a fully executed, successful national program?
Yeah, let me start by saying a lot of good points that you said, Angela, but let me start by saying, no doubt, COVID-19 has put a lot of strain on the global supply chain, and it's been felt by a lot of organizations, to your point, around the world, especially micro and small enterprise, which have so much to offer to the government of Canada, not just in the recovery of COVID-19, of course, but on an ongoing basis. And into the future, and we totally recognize this. What we've seen with micro and small enterprises is that these organizations really are often characterized as highly innovative, and that's what we've seen, and very creative, right? So we want to see their ideas for solving our problem just as much as we want their ideas from the large organization. These micro and small enterprises are also the kind of business that really are most impacted by the complexities of our traditional procurement processes, and we heard that from them. So we hear them loud and clear when they tell us how difficult it is and how we need to improve, so it's easier for them to submit bids and win contracts. So speaking of Scale Up, which is as you said, it's a program specifically aimed at opening doors for these organizations. It's a good example of a mechanism that could give a new vendor its first chance to work with the government in Canada. As a new provider, they could leverage that experience to continue to be part of the supply chains. I think that we need to make the procurement with underrepresented group, no doubt, easy to leverage by buyers, but also easy to understand by the vendors. Obviously, this would encourage more buyers within the government of Canada to naturally embrace that route. On the Scale Up, as you know, Angela, we're starting. I would say to the audience, stay tuned. There's a lot of good communication information that's coming on that initiative, and it sounds very, very promising.
Oh, I think it's incredible. I mentioned earlier that I ran my own company and had to do business in the Middle East and the EU. But to be able to create a more accessible opportunity to work with the Canadian government is massive for any startup, scale up, small, medium enterprise to have that credential. So thrilled that this is one of those changes that are happening. So now I want to land on a call to action, looking forward to the future. Procurement obviously has the ability to have a lot more impact from Canada, really outwardly facing and really supporting value to our communities and our country, as well as more and more companies around Canada have the opportunity to engage in the procurement process. So what do you believe that we as industry and government need to do to make procurement a full-on paradigm shift for Canada? I know we've been working together and bringing the shared services team out to meet other levels of government. What do you think will really entrench that paradigm shift to agile procurement?
Yeah, so let me start by saying again, I agree with you. Procurement offers a significant opportunity to deliver value to Canada and Canadians by investing in Canada and Canadians.
Yeah.
So, and for example, that's the whole reason behind the program like Scale Up. That looks to drive more inclusivity into our procurement processes. Now, in terms of what vendors should do, let me first by starting by saying, go on buy and sell the government procurement website. Look for opportunities that make sense for your company, and get involved, get engaged. Like there's more and more events that we organize to actually engage the industry. So I would say to all the vendors, participate in those engagement, to share your input, your feedback. On the procurement itself, but also the procurement processes as well, right? So this engagement is actually a key opportunity to address what might be the challenges moving forward. The other thing I would say, Angela, is, and as you know, TechNation has been working with us on the digital marketplace, right? So, so the marketplace is hosted by TechNation, but I think it's important to mention that it's open to all Canadian IT vendors and all association. In fact, there's around 20 Canadian IT business association in partnership in the marketplace, which is pretty fantastic. So again, you don't have to be a TechNation member, and you can sign up. So I think right now, Angela, we have roughly 530 companies that are signed up. So we would like obviously to see that number growing up essentially. So my thinking is, I think we have to apply the principle of true collaboration process. Let's put together the industry, the vendors, and us. Let's put the problem on the table and work together to imagine and create new ways to enable procurement to deliver value to our country and Canadian citizens.
Yeah, great. And, you know, thanks for mentioning the digital marketplace that is open to every technology company across Canada. We actually have a digital marketplace, government to business and business to business event coming up the end of November. And we're inviting everybody out there to participate in that. We have a lot of speakers from the government, 3 deputy ministers, as a matter of fact. So that's going to be quite exciting. So we've covered a lot of ground today, Stefan. Again, totally a great news story, and really proud of what we've been able to do as collaborators with your organization. You talked about some of the key things, like the government investing in Canadian innovation through the Scale Up program, through really working hard at the Agile Procurement 3.0 and establishing a center of excellence. I think that's formidable and also really kind of non-negotiable to make it happen. So really thrilled with what we've been able to do through this couple of years of collaboration. Hope to see a lot more. I think that you guys are certainly doing what we're hoping from an industry perspective, which is flipping government orthodoxy and creating a paradigm shift that's really going to stick. Yeah. So look forward to all these programs and driving that across Canada together.
Yeah, as I keep saying, Angela, I think that we can have the best tools and processes, and we're going to develop that together. But it's people that make things work, right? And I think that the people on both sides, in the private public sector, are the one that actually been making this very, very successful.